Good morning, children. Today we are going to read the poem My Mother at 66. It's a very small poem and it's actually a straight from the heart poem. A daughter has written this poem for her mother who is growing old, who is turning pale, and the daughter is pained to realize that in a few days or so she will not be able to see her mother, but she is not able to express her feelings towards her mother, so she has written this poem. We'll go line by line. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me. In these lines, the poet recalls a trip back to Cochin from her holiday in her parents' house the previous week. It was a Friday, and that morning she was driving from her mother next to her on the front seat. So they were driving back to Cochin. Dozed, open mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked, but soon put that thought away. In these lines, the poet says that she was observing her mother who had fallen asleep on the front seat with her mouth slightly open. That happens with the old age people. When you are also traveling with old age people, you might have noticed they fall asleep very fast, and while they are sleeping, they their mouth remains open. How it is? Because when they grow old, their muscles, they loosen up, they don't have control over their facial muscles. So what happens? Their mouth is open. She also looks at her mother like that, and suddenly she feels that, has something happened to my mother? But then she puts that thought away and she says, no, everything is fine. And it's just that she's turning old and she's turning pale, and that she's sleeping, and nothing has gone wrong with her mother. She was observing the mother who had fallen asleep on the front seat. Her mother's face was pale, and it reminded her of the nearly white face of a dead body. It's then that she comes to realize that her mother was not young any longer, and that her appearance had caught up with her age. And this was very hard for her, for the poet to accept. You are now very young, but when you come to our age, you will realize that seeing your parents grow old, it's very difficult phase, very, very difficult. We can't imagine life without our parents. And that is what is happening with the poet Kamla Das. She is realizing that her mother is, any time it will be for her mother, for her venture to heavenly abode. But she doesn't want to think about it. It's very hard for her to accept. Looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. But after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, wan, pale. She says in these lines, she says that turning away from her aging mother, she decides to look out of the window of the car which she was driving. Outside, her eyes fell on the trees. When the vehicles pass by, normally you also must have noticed, when the vehicles pass by, we actually feel that the trees are moving. But the car was moving actually so fast, and because of the relative motion, its law of physics, that it seemed that all the trees that she could see were running at full speed past her. It seems that those trees are quite youthful. It's a contrast to the situation. Near to her, her mother is sleeping, who is old, and outside she sees trees who are moving very fast. That means that fast speed is related to the youth. So it's a contrast in the poem. If they had the energy to move at such a fast pace, the poet also feels for the children who are coming out of their houses. Again, a contrast to the old age. Children are merry, they are happy, they are young, they are full of life, and the mother who is losing on life. Her mind was distracted by these sights. However, the poet passed all those sights and reaches the airport, and then her mind is distracted, and at a short distance she is chanced to notice the old woman. She just looks at her as a late winter's moon and felt that old familiar ache, my childhood's fear. But all I said was, see you soon, Amma, and all I did was smile and smile. The poet compares her mother's face with the sight of a moon. In winters, if you observe the moon, it turns white, it turns pale, it loses color, its luster. That beauty isn't there. And this makes her realize of her childhood fear. During childhood, we are all afraid to lose our parents. If you leave a child in the, you must have noticed, sometimes the children just move, leaving their parents' hand. They will move around in the mall, and if the parents hide somewhere, 1 or 2 minutes the child will play. But then again, when the child realizes the parents are not around, he becomes troublesome. Starts crying. He will look for her parents and so many things. This child becomes an restless. So same is happening with her. She remembers, she is reminded of her childhood fear. And all the while, even though she was in great agony, she just tells her mother that, see you soon, Amma. That means she ends the poem with a positive note. She says that, see you soon. That means whenever she comes back, she will see her mother in the same way as she is now. So this was the poem, and question answers you have to do from the poem as it is there. Okay. Thank you, children.